Hello, this is Will Faber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a submission by Drewry. She doesn't tell me where she is. Looks like a beautiful area, wherever she is. In her 11-year-old Arab warm blood cross that she's been working with for a few years. She's been to dressage shows and tells me that the dressage judges told her that she needed to be more impulsed and more over the back. And they are very right about that, for sure. What I see right away, I have, of course, watched this entire video, and I've read her email that she sent me about the horse, and she's been through some dressage trainers, or so-called dressage trainers, who've tried to help her a little bit. And I will tell you, the first thing that she told me was that the dressage trainer told her to tie the horse's mouth shut with a noseband in order to stop her from opening and chewing her mouth. Well, I want to tell you all, if any dressage trainer ever tells you that, they're not a dressage trainer, and all that will do is cover up a problem. A horse that's not working through its back will always open up its mouth when you take contact. So that's why these so-called dressage trainers have taken to making the nose bands tighter and tighter and tighter in order to cover up that issue, as dressage judges are supposed to count 2 points off every time they see a horse open his mouth, because it shows that the horse is not in correct contact. Happily, in the United States at least, though I'm not sure where you are exactly, they have changed the rules so that you can no longer show with horses' mouths shut. However, I don't think they're doing a very good job of enforcing the rule myself, and I think it's a very important one. And I highly recommend that all of you, anybody listening to this, when you go to horse shows here in the United States, be sure that that is being done. Go to your ring steward and be sure that horses are not being allowed to go into the ring with their mouths tied shut, or at least they're checking them when they come out of the ring. Because, once again, that's one of the things that we look at to see whether or not the horse is moving correctly and how correctly the training has been. And, of course, she discovered with a nervous, more Arab kind of horses tend to have a little more blood in them, even though this one seems to be quite sluggish. The mouth will never become quiet, and the horse became more and more nervous. Drew, you talked to me in the beginning about trying to work on collection. You should understand that collection is something that comes at a very high level after the horse has been completely developed over the top line, has had time. Over about a 2-year period of time, what happens is the horse's back strengthens and the withers actually pull up out of the shoulders, and we get a much more uphill look to the horse. But you can quite clearly see with this horse, when you see it go by, that it's completely hollow behind the saddle there, which tells me the horse's back is completely collapsed and on the way, to being quite damaged. If you don't do something about that now, what ultimately will happen is the horse will become more and more sway back and can ultimately cause things like kissing spine, which means that the actually top of the spinal cord is actually the spine itself rather is actually hitting together at the top of each vertebrae, which can cause the horse a great deal of pain and make it not want to move and this sort of thing. So it's very important that you correct that and get on the right path with that right away. Once again, we'll take a look when she comes around here. You'll be able to see clearly how big a hole there is behind the saddle there and how downhill the horse looks. You got to remember that a horse that's not working through a back is always downhill and is always on its forehand, no matter how high up you bring the head and neck in what we call false collection. So you need to get the word collection out of your mind and be thinking about working gaits. And after 2 years of correct working gaits, you can begin to work on collection, which is, after the horse is developed over its top line, the degree to which the horse lowers and stays lowered behind, so you get more thrust off the ground. But we can see with this horse that because it is so disconnected from back to front, it really doesn't have any thrust off the ground at all. It barely looks like it's trotting. It's kind of mincing along basically on its front end. Its back legs are not taking any weight at all. And in order to move forward, you're going to need to solve that problem. So stretching and getting the horse down and out is what you need to do. However, we need to achieve it on a little better level than what you're doing here. Now, what I would suggest with a horse that is as hollow as this one is, once again, look there behind the saddle, and you see the big dip there. The horse's its belly is actually, you should see a correctly trained horse. You will see the belly rise up, and you'll see a line form, just like a person with good ab muscles along the edge of the rib cage. And he says it's because it's not only lifting the back; it has to pull the belly up. Kind of like Pilates for people, same kind of thing. You're engaging your core. Well, the horse is exactly the same way. We have to engage its core in order for it to work correctly and to take that shock of movement out of the hard tissue. That's the whole point of having the horse over the top line, is it puts the shock absorber system on the horse so that every time the horse takes a step, it's not going directly into the hard tissue of the joints. Now this is a little better trot here as it's swinging forward, and as you've experienced, at least if you knew nothing else but just let go of the reins and let the horse trot forward, it will be better off than if you didn't. So you're on the right track here. However, I would definitely suggest that you take a look at the videos that I have on lunging. I would definitely be lunging a horse like this. If a horse is not over its top line and you add weight to it, it's going to be that much more difficult to it for it to be able to achieve that position over the top line. So don't worry about your transitions for right now. If you worry about transitions, that is the head and neck position, whether it's coming up or down when you start the horse is hollow in the back, period. So it's not going to be able to do any transitions correctly until you solve that problem. So once again, I would go back to the lunging with this horse to start there. Start with working the side reins and see if you can get her to stretch into the side reins correctly. If you can't get that, then I highly recommend looking at the video on using the sham bone, which is the only device that we ever use, which just allows the horse, puts a little pull pressure so the horse stretches down and out. So you might want to take a look at that. But I would definitely go back to lunging with this horse and get it moving a little more correctly and stretching into the contact and time. If a horse is opening its mouth, it basically is telling you that it's uncomfortable somewhere in the body, and that's what leads to all that nervous mouth issues. And as I say, tying the mouth shut will never solve the problem, and anyone who tells you that, you should immediately run from and warn anybody else against, because no real dressage rider would do that. That's just putting a band-aid on a problem is all that is. So once again, let's take a look at how she's going. You know, basically you need to go back to that beginning issue once again of the lunge line, get the horse stretching. You know, my basic rule is if I can't get a horse to stretch into the contact on the lunge line, I doubt very seriously it's going to do it over the back, because once you add the weight of the rider, in order for the horse to stretch into the contact correctly, it must lift its back to some degree. And of course, stretching down will help facilitate the back come up as well. So we need to go back to that groundwork, which should have been done with the horse years ago, to establish that connection over the top line so the horse can move correctly. As you can see with this horse, it has absolutely no upwards thrust whatsoever. Come back to the walk, and it's kind of crawling along, almost like dragging its leg over the ground. If you see how it's almost dragging its toe over the ground, because it can't connect with your weight on it. It simply doesn't have enough strength. So we need to go back to that beginning work and get that straightened out before we go on to the riding work. But this is certainly much better. If you knew nothing, if you did nothing but this, certainly the horse would be better, and you certainly have experienced already that the horse has calmed down for you and this kind of thing. You know, horses become nervous when people ask them to do work that they don't know how to do or they're physically incapable of doing. And that's where most resistance starts. And unfortunately today we have so many so-called trainers that do not understand and have never developed horses correctly. You know, they're just teaching the horse tricks, so to speak. Tricks of flying changes, tricks of just trotting around, pulling the head down, this sort of thing. You know, but they're not really developing the horses. Also why we see so many horses come here from Europe. People pay a lot of money for horses that come with beautiful top lines that have been trained correctly. And then I see them 6 months later and they're a complete mess, and the riders don't understand and the trainers don't know. So their answer is to keep pulling the head down, this sort of thing, which only just shortens the horse's gaits. So once again, you should be talking about trying to get your horse in working gaits. And working gaits mean working over the back. That's what they intended when the term was originally used. It means the point at which the horse is working over the back, and that's what it differs from an ordinary trot with a horse hollow, so to speak. So a horse in working gaits is working over the back. So we must be working towards that all the time. Doing things like a lot of halts, like I see you doing there, that sort of thing, really do nothing for a horse like this, because once again, the horse is so hollow in its back, his belly is dropped down, it's literally dragging its toes over the ground. You know, halting it is not really going to solve any of your problem, and is certainly not going to collect it, as you were talking about earlier. You know, once again, collection is not pulling the head down or pulling the head up and pulling the head in, as we see so many people doing. It's something that happens in the back end of the horse after we have established working gaits. Once again, collection means the lowering of the three joints of the hind leg. That's what it means, which develops more thrust, just like a person standing and bending their legs. So once again, I would go back to the lunging work, get that straightened out, which will get the horse a little freer without the weight up there. So here we are trotting, and once again, same kind of thing here. You know, she's trotting along. This is a little better trot, looks a little better, but it's still very flat. There isn't any thrust off the ground. The horse is not connected, that is not connected from front to back. And you can see that, you know, she's kind of U-neck. The bottom part of her neck is, even though you're kind of trying to get her head down, you can still clearly see that the bottom part of the neck is what is the fattest, as you see right there. So that tells you that the horse, and if you look closely, you'll kind of see that this horse is really kind of pulling itself along with the shoulders. And so once again, here now we go into the canter, And, there isn't much improvement. The horse is still hollow. It's just sort of cantering along on its front end. So, though you're getting it to stretch out a little better there, that is a little better. And, once in a while, about 1 in every 1,000 horses I run into canters better over its back than it trots. And that is actually kind of often the horses that I've seen that have been hunters, as you say this horse was, because very often when I go to hunter barns, I see very little trot work. All they do is come out and immediately canter and canter and canter and canter and jump and jump and jump. When I was a 3-day event rider and had a 3-day event barn in California for many years, and I've also ridden fox hunters all my life, sort of thing. And what we used to do in the old days was we used to jump our horses, maybe at the most 2 or 3 days a week. And once a horse knew how to jump, we would jump them, only one before we were going to horse shows and work flat work, flat work, flat work. Now this is looking a little better. There, you're getting a little better stretch there, like that. Now that's the best work that I've seen you do so far, right there, when you get her into that stretch. That's good. Now that's actually pretty good for her, even though a little inactive. But that's the best work you're doing. So once again, we need to get the horse consistent in gaits. That is, the horse needs to be consistent into the contact when you're riding the trot in order to make a good transition back and forth. So until you can get that happening, that is, until you can get the horse consistently into the contact in the bridle, in a single gait, you're not going to be able to get good transitions between the gaits. So don't even worry about them at this point with this horse. All you should be doing is putting her in her trot, sending her forward, getting her into the stretch like you're doing here. Now this is not bad. This is certainly the best work that I have seen on them. Of course, I've watched this video before. I'm commenting on that. Now that's quite good there, but you're making the big mistake here of sitting to the trot. When a horse is hollow in the back, you should never sit to its trot. So you should be rising here instead of sitting and sending the horse on into a much more active trot. I would spend probably the next 6 months rising to the trot on this horse until you get the horse clearly over its back. Once again, I want you to watch our videos on how to develop the sitting trot, where you only sit for 3 strides at a time, 5 strides at a time, and then get back off of the horse's back. So no sitting trot for quite some while until you can get this horse to be consistent, because all that's happening here is, once again, it's collapsing her back even more. If you look at her trotting here, you'll see that she's still pushing off the ground when the leg is quite far behind the body. There is no upwards thrust. That is, the leg is not pushing you up into the air and propelling you forward. She's basically just dragging herself along by her front end. So now if you need the canter to help you get it a little more active, that's okay. Once again, same thing here. I would get up off of the horse's back in the canter, more of a 2-point position, that sort of thing. Because once again, we're trying to get the horse's back to lift up. So if you're constantly sitting on it, it's not going to do the horse any good. So get up off the horse's back in a 2-point position in the canter, maybe shorten your stirrups a little bit, sorry, and so that you have a little more room. So once again, even when we ride, we must always be giving the horse room in the back to come up until that back is strengthened. Then we can sit on it and it will support us. Once again, now this is a pretty good stretch in the canter. That's a little better. You are achieving some things with the horse, but once again, you see when you made the downwards transition how she just sort of propped against her front end because she's not strong enough yet to have done that with you in the seated position. So get off of her back, stay in a rising trot. You've had some moments here that have been pretty good. So I think if you stayed in a rising trot and got her a little more active and sent her on a little more, once again, you've compared the videos yourself, as you said, to our videos, and you will see how much more forward and active we're moving the horses than you are doing. And once again, you'll never see us sit to the trot on a horse that's hollow. You never, ever want to sit on a horse that's hollow. And it takes about 2 years for the horses to establish the foundation on a horse. It doesn't matter whether you're starting with an 11-year-old or a 2-year-old. It takes exactly the same amount of time, or pretty much within months, so to speak, of what it takes to get this to happen. So once again, you had some moments there at the best of that stretch where I showed you. That was pretty good, and that's where you'd want to keep her only even a little more active and no sitting trot whatsoever for quite some time until you really feel her strength and you feel that change. So looking at her here, you can see that she's been a little bit broken in the neck. Once again, what I mean by that, if you follow the neck up, you'll see that she's not flexing at the pole. She's actually flexing in the neck further back. Once again, that's from being forced against the hand. And I've already watched this and I've seen your video of the horse when it was showing. And once again, same thing. It was much, much worse. The horse had its head pulled down. It was extremely hollow in the back, not moving through at all. And that is not anything that would ever lead to anything with a horse like this. You know, what you have to remember in today's world, you know, people watch, you know, these people buying these $1,000,000 packers that have such fabulous movement that no one ever seems to notice that the horses are hollow. But you need to start noticing that. And that's where so many people have gone wrong, because they've taken lessons from people who've gone to shows, and they think because they get ribbons on their hollow horses, you know, if you're at a place where, you know, 99% of the people are doing it wrong, well, you know, some of those people who are doing it wrong are going to get ribbons, and then pretty soon they're calling themselves trainers because they've won a couple of ribbons. Once again here, no sitting trot. And just a lot more active, though. That's looking a little better there. Good. And notice how much better the horse for yourself looks when you are rising to the trot. As soon as you sit to the trot, you can clearly see the horse shortens up. So learning the order that you have to do things in is what's so important. We were talking about how she's flexing back in the neck a little bit there. So we want her to get stretched into the contact so that we can heal that neck where she's been over-flexed in the neck a little bit. But this is the best work I've seen you do. This is where you want to get her at least this and more active. But of everything I've seen here today on this video, the parts where you're getting her active in a rising trot, you're getting some moments where she's stretching into the contact, and that is much better and the best part of the work that we're getting. So keep that up. Once again, I'd like to see you go back and study our videos on lunging. Once again, sitting trot here. Now watch how that does. As soon as you sit to the trot, she shortens up and actually goes even more on the forehand there. So once again, I want to see you go back to the work in the rising trot. Go back to the work on the lunge line, study those videos, and see if we can get her out. So the work that you're doing here, this is actually, you know, going to stop the horse from stretching in. As you can see when you sit, how much she shortens up. So our correct goal in training is to get the biggest gaits we can get, and then when we get real collection where the horse lowers behind, we have something big and quite spectacular to look at. Once again, so many people today get by because their horses are so fabulous movers. You know, then unfortunately, showing in dressage in many areas has become more like dog showing, and it's come down to who can afford the most expensive horse, even though it's completely upside down. So, but that kind of work will never work with a horse like this. This is not a $1,000,000 mover. It's a very nice horse, but if you try to train in the way that some of these people do who get by on how fabulous their horses are, it's just not going to work, because all you'll end up with a horse like this is just even more shortened gaits and not much else. So once again, you know, I don't mind the canter so much on this horse, but still, once again, I would get off of her back. I feel it's just too hollow. I would go back and try to work more walk work and work trot work, especially the trot work, remembering that we build muscle in the trot. We tend to build wind in the canter. Now, if you have a horse that's quite sluggish, as you say this one is, then that's not a bad thing to do. But if we canter the horse and it's hollow all the time, it's going to have very detrimental effects on the horse's legs in the long run. So once again, you come back to the rising trot, and this looks pretty good. But she's still not, there you go. That's actually the best the horse looks, right there, even a little bit, but it needs to get lower. You've had a few moments where she's gotten the neck out even longer than that, and that's what you want to look for. There, like that. I want her down like that. That's better. And then just send her on a little more actively. Once again, but no sitting trot. This horse needs, you know, many, many months of work without sitting trot in order to strengthen her back. Because every time you sit, you're just exaggerating the hollowness. Now, that's a little better trot there, though. Once again, she's just still not stretching into it enough. But you can clearly see how much better the horse looks and how much freer it is. And as you said, the horse has become very relaxed. I mean, very nervous when you were shortening her up and trying to do this phony collection, which is what we will see in this video at the end of you doing. So get her stretching out much, much more. But go back to the lunging videos. Use the side reins if that doesn't help you. If you can't get it done that way, look at the video on the sham bone and how to use that correctly. It's very good for horses like this, and it doesn't try to put the horse in a false frame. It simply encourages the horse to stretch down. That's why we use it. We never want to put the horse into a false frame, which is what people are doing who are tying mouths shut and pulling the heads down on horses. They're riding the front end. That's what it means to ride the front end. Real dressage, real riding is done from the back end, from the back to the front. So the legs are much more active than the hands, getting the horse forward into the contact and never shortening the horse's stride. When you shorten the horse all up, it's just going to hollow through its back, and you'll get very little movement. Her neck looks a little better there, not quite so broken, but still, once again, not swinging quite actively enough, not deep enough. So you need to let this horse get down in that low frame and then keep her there. Don't try to bring her up. She needs to stay there. So when you feel the horse lose the gait that you wanted, then you know that you have done too much and used to get off her back and just send her on forward again. So in just a minute here, we're going to take a look at what the horse was doing back when you thought it was going first level. So here she is, mouth tied shut, and that nose band, by the way, there is way too low on the mouth, actually cutting off the circulation. You would never want a flash nose band to be tight, and you certainly never want it that low on the nose, because that's where the soft cartilage is. So you can see here that, her gait is very irregular here. You're sitting through the middle of her back. Her head is pulled up, but she's not flexing at the pole. She's actually flexing back in the neck and not in the pole. And you can see that she's still completely, her neck, if it weren't that you were held in, but you can still see that she's just pulling with her front end. And look how short the front end is now moving. So the horse is no longer swinging through here. All this will end up doing is getting you a very short trot. And the way this came back to me, I was a 3-day event rider, and I wanted to learn more about dressage. But when I tried to ride dressage the way you are doing here, which everybody taught in America at the time, my horses couldn't jump, and that's what opened my eyes to this whole thing. If your so-called dressage is ruining your horse's ability to jump, that should be a big red flag to people trying to do it, that there's something wrong with this picture. So once again, here you are, and basically just sitting through the back of the horse. And while the horse maybe looks a little prettier to you because its head is up, it's really kind of stumbling along on its front end. This is not good at all. So you'd want to let this go. You would never want to do this kind of sitting trot on a horse like this whose back is undeveloped. So you need to get up off of her back, let her rise the trot, let her get into a frame where she'll be able to move more actively and swing through her back, most importantly. So I'd love to see another video of you sometime. I hope you will listen to my advice here, and I hope it helps. And I hope we can get this horse out in a much longer frame. Now you see there, she's coming behind the bridle there. You're trying to do a leg yield. All right, see you next.